My name is Margaret Chen, and at 73 years old, I never imagined I'd be plotting revenge against my own son. But sometimes life pushes you to places you never thought you'd go. It all started 6 months ago when my son Derek, now 45 and supposedly successful in his tech career, decided I was too much trouble to keep around. After living in my own home for 50 years, the same house where I raised him and his sister. After their father died, Derek convinced me it was time to downsize and move somewhere with professional care. That's what he called Sunset Manor, a dreary nursing home on the outskirts of town that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. "Mom, you're becoming a burden," Derek had said during what I thought was just a family dinner. "Sarah and I have been talking, and we think it's best for everyone if you move to a place where trained professionals can take care of you." Sarah, my daughter-in-law who barely looked up from her phone during family gatherings. The woman who had systematically poisoned my son's mind against me over the past 5 years. "A burden?" I had repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Derek, I raised you. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. That's exactly the problem, Mom. You're living in the past. You can't take care of yourself anymore. Last week you left the stove on. The week before you forgot to take your medication." He was right about the stove, but wrong about everything else. I had left it on once, because I was distracted by a phone call from his sister Lisa, who lived across the country and actually cared about my well-being. And I hadn't forgotten my medication. I had deliberately skipped it because it made me nauseous, but try explaining that to someone who's already made up his mind. "Derek, please," I had pleaded. "I can be more careful. We can get one of those medical alert systems. The decision is made, Mom. We've already put a deposit down at Sunset Manor. They have a room available next week. Next week." As if I were an old piece of furniture he was finally getting around to disposing of. That night, I lay awake in my bed, the bed I'd shared with his father for 22 years before cancer took him away, and I made a decision. If Derek wanted to treat me like a burden, then by God, I was going to give him a burden he'd never forget. But first, let me tell you about my life before Derek decided I was disposable. I immigrated to America from Hong Kong when I was 22, speaking broken English and carrying nothing but a suitcase and dreams of a better life. I met Robert, Derek's father, at a community college where I was taking English classes and he was studying engineering. He was kind, patient, and saw something in me that I barely saw in myself. We married 2 years later, and I threw myself into becoming the perfect American wife and mother. I learned to cook meatloaf alongside dim sum, celebrated Thanksgiving with the same enthusiasm as Chinese New Year, and worked tirelessly to give our children every opportunity I never had. When Robert died suddenly of a heart attack at 51, I didn't crumble. I couldn't afford to. Derek was in high school, preparing for college, and Lisa was just entering her teenage years. I took a second job at a local restaurant, working days as a seamstress and nights as a waitress to keep our family afloat. I attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every soccer game. I helped Derek with his college applications, driving him to campus visits across 3 states in my aging Honda Civic. When he got into Stanford for computer science, I cried tears of joy and worked extra shifts to help pay for what his scholarships didn't cover. This is the woman Derek decided was a burden. The move to Sunset Manor was humiliating. Derek and Sarah showed up with a U-Haul truck and 3 college kids they'd hired to pack up my life into boxes labeled keep, donate, and trash. 50 years of memories sorted in a single afternoon. "You can only bring personal items that fit in the room, Mom," Sarah said, not even looking at me as she directed the workers to throw away my wedding china. "The facility provides everything else you need." Everything I needed. A single bed, a small dresser, and a view of the parking lot. That's what they thought I needed. But what they didn't know was that I'd been secretly preparing for this day ever since Derek first mentioned exploring options for my care 6 months earlier. You don't survive immigration, widowhood, and 40 years in America without learning to be strategic. The first part of my plan had been simple: documentation. Every time Derek visited, every conversation about my declining health, every dismissive comment from Sarah, I recorded it all. Not illegally, mind you. California is a one-party consent state, and I was definitely one party who consented to recording these conversations. I also did something Derek never expected from his burden of a mother. I hired a lawyer. Martha Weinstein was a 70-year-old attorney who specialized in elder law and had a particular hatred for children who abandoned their parents. We met through my friend Helen at the senior center, and Martha took my case on a contingency basis after hearing my story. "Margaret," she had said during our first meeting, "what your son is doing might not be illegal, but it sure as hell isn't right. Let's see what we can do about that." The second part of my plan required patience, something I'd learned plenty of over the years. For the first month at Sunset Manor, I played the part of the grateful, compliant mother. I called Derek every few days to thank him for taking such good care of me. I sent sweet text messages to Sarah, praising her for helping Derek make such a difficult decision. I even sent them pictures of my small room, saying how cozy it was. Meanwhile, I was gathering intelligence. Sunset Manor, it turned out, was owned by a company called Compassionate Care, Inc., which sounded lovely until you discovered they were under investigation by the state for Medicare fraud. The facility was understaffed, overpriced, and the professional care Derek had paid for consisted mainly of overworked CNAs who changed shifts so frequently that none of them knew the residents' names. My roommate, Ethel, had been there for 3 years and hadn't seen her son since Christmas. "He lives 20 minutes away," she told me one night, her voice hollow with resignation. 20 minutes, and he can't be bothered to visit his own mother. That's when I realized Derek wasn't unusual. He was part of an epidemic of children who viewed their aging parents as inconveniences to be managed rather than people to be loved. But unlike Ethel, I wasn't going to go quietly into that good night. The third part of my plan began to unfold in month 2, right around Derek's 45th birthday. I had Martha send Derek a letter, professionally worded and carefully crafted, informing him that I was considering legal action for elder abuse and neglect. Not because I intended to follow through immediately, but because I wanted him to know I wasn't as helpless as he assumed. His phone call came within hours. "Mom, what the hell is this letter about?" His voice was tight with panic. "Elder abuse? Are you insane? I put you in the best facility I could find." "Did you, Derek?" I asked calmly. "Because yesterday I waited 4 hours for someone to help me to the bathroom. Last week, they served me spoiled chicken that made me sick for 3 days. And 2 weeks ago, I watched them give another resident the wrong medication because they can't keep track of who needs what. That's not, every facility has problems, but problems. Derek, I'm living in a room the size of your walk-in closet, eating food that wouldn't be fit for your dog, and being cared for by people who change jobs every 2 months. If this is the best you could find, I'd hate to see the worst." There was silence on the other end of the line. "What do you want, Mom? Right now? I want you to visit me. Actually visit, not just drop by for 20 minutes every few weeks to ease your guilt. I want you to see what your decision really looks like. I've been busy with work, and Sarah's been..." "Busy? Yes, I know. You've been busy for the past 6 months, while I've been sitting here watching my life tick away in a place that feels more like a prison than a home." He did visit the following week, and I could see the shock in his eyes when he really looked around Sunset Manor for the first time. The peeling wallpaper, the residents lined up in wheelchairs along the hallway like forgotten luggage, the smell of industrial cleaners failing to mask the underlying odor of human decline. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't realize it was so depressing? Degrading?" "Yeah, Derek, it is. But he still didn't offer to take me home. Instead, he promised to look into other options, which was Derek speak, for I'll feel guilty for a week and then forget about it." That's when I moved to phase 4 of my plan. I started making friends with the other families. It's amazing what you can learn when you pay attention. Mrs. Patterson's daughter was embezzling from her mother's account. Mr. Rodriguez's son had power of attorney and was selling off his father's property without permission. And Sarah, sweet, innocent Sarah, who never had time to visit, had been using my social security number to open credit cards. Martha helped me dig deeper into that particular revelation. And what we found was shocking. Sarah had racked up nearly $40,000 in debt using my identity, thinking I was too old and isolated to notice. The credit card statements were being sent to Derek's address, where Sarah presumably intercepted them. "This is identity theft, Margaret," Martha informed me with barely contained glee. "This is a felony. We can have her arrested." But I had a better idea. Phase 5 was the most satisfying part of my plan. I called Derek and asked him to bring Sarah for a visit. "I want to apologize to her," I said sweetly. "I know I've been difficult about this whole transition, and I want to make things right." They came the following Saturday, Sarah looking uncomfortable and checking her phone constantly, Derek hovering near the door like he couldn't wait to leave. "Sarah," I said, "I want to thank you for helping Derek make such a caring decision about my living situation." She smiled that fake smile she'd perfected over the years. "Of course, Margaret. We just want what's best for you. I know you do. That's why I wanted to give you this." I handed her a manila envelope, thick with documents. "What is it?" Derek asked, moving closer. "Just some paperwork I needed to get in order," I said innocently. "Sarah, why don't you open it?" Sarah's face went white as she pulled out the first document, a credit report showing all the accounts she'd opened in my name. "Mom, what is this?" Derek demanded, but I could see the understanding dawning in his eyes as he looked at Sarah's guilty expression. "That, my dear son, is what a real burden looks like. While you were so worried about me being too much trouble, your wife was stealing my identity and racking up thousands of dollars in debt. The police report is the second document in that folder. I filed it yesterday." The room exploded into chaos. Sarah started crying. Derek started yelling. And I sat back in my wheelchair, which I didn't actually need but had, started using for dramatic effect, and watched my plan unfold beautifully. But that wasn't the end of it. Phase 6 had been months in the making, and it required help from someone Derek would never suspect, his sister, Lisa. While Derek had been busy treating me like an inconvenience, Lisa had been flying out from Seattle every few months to spend real time with me. She was horrified when she learned about Sunset Manor, and even more outraged when I told her about Sarah's identity theft. "Derek's lost his mind," she said during one of her visits. "This isn't the brother I grew up with." Lisa was a successful attorney herself, specializing in corporate law, and she had contacts throughout the legal system. More importantly, she had something Derek desperately needed: our father's inheritance. When Robert died, he'd left me the house and most of his assets, but he'd also set up trust funds for both children that wouldn't be accessible until they were 50, unless both beneficiaries agreed to early distribution. Derek had been counting on that money to pay for a new house he and Sarah had already put an offer on. "Lisa," I said during one of our phone calls, "how would you feel about blocking Derek's access to his trust fund until he makes some changes in how he treats family?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she started laughing. "Mom, you're more devious than I gave you credit for." "Yes, absolutely yes." The call came 2 weeks later. "Mom, Lisa says she won't sign off on releasing my trust fund early unless I..." Derek's voice was tight with controlled anger. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, Derek. I told her how you dumped me in this place and walked away. I told her about Sarah's little shopping sprees with my credit cards. And I told her how you've treated me like a burden instead of your mother." "This is blackmail." "No, Derek, this is consequences. You made a decision to prioritize your convenience over my well-being. Now you get to live with the results of that decision." "What do you want?" Phase 7 was simple. I wanted my life back. I want to go home, Derek. I want to live in my house, the house where I raised you, the house your father and I built our life in. I want you to visit me there, really visit, not just drop by when you feel guilty. And I want Sarah to pay back every penny she stole from me before I decide whether or not to press charges. That's impossible. We can't what? Can't treat me like a human being instead of a problem to be solved? Can't show me the same respect I showed you for 45 years? Can't acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I deserve better than this? The silence stretched between us, and I could practically hear him calculating the cost of his selfishness. "And if I don't agree? Then you can explain to your sister why you chose to abandon your mother. You can explain to your friends why your wife is facing felony charges for elder fraud. And you can explain to your mortgage company why you can't afford that new house you've already committed to buying. It took Derek 3 days to make his decision. But eventually, he came back to Sunset Manor with Martha's paperwork already, signed, and a moving truck scheduled for the following weekend. There are conditions, he said. Stiffly, I'm listening. We hire a part-time caregiver to check on you twice a week. You wear a medical alert system, and if there are any more incidents like the stove thing, we reassess the situation. Agreed, I said. But I have conditions too. Derek looked surprised, as if he'd forgotten I was allowed to negotiate my own life. You visit me every Sunday for dinner. Not 20 minutes of awkward small talk, real visits where we eat together and talk about our lives. Sarah pays back the money she stole in monthly installments, and she apologizes to me in person. And Derek? What? You never, ever call me a burden again. Moving back home was like being reborn. My neighbors, who had been horrified when they learned Derek had put me in a nursing home, welcomed me back with casseroles and offers to help. My garden, which had been neglected for 6 months, needed work but was salvageable. And my house, my beautiful, imperfect house, felt like a sanctuary after the institutional sterility of Sunset Manor. Derek kept his word about the Sunday dinners, though it took months for our relationship to heal. Sarah paid back the money and did apologize, though I could tell it physically pained her to do so. The caregiver, a lovely woman named Rosa, became more of a friend than an employee, and the medical alert system gave me confidence to continue living independently. But the most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't the money or the apologies or even getting my house back. It was watching Derek slowly realize what he'd almost lost. During one of our Sunday dinners, about 4 months after I'd moved back home, Derek was helping me in the kitchen when he suddenly stopped and looked around. I forgot how much I loved this kitchen, he said quietly. Remember when Dad would make pancakes on Saturday mornings and we'd all crowd around this table? I remember, I said, not looking up from the vegetables I was chopping. I remember a lot of things you seem to have forgotten. Mom. His voice was different, softer, younger somehow. I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I let Sarah convince me that, well, it doesn't matter what she said. I should have known better. I should have trusted my own judgment about my own mother. I set down my knife and looked at him. For the first time in years, I saw my son instead of the stranger he'd become. Derek, do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the nursing home, as awful as that place was. It wasn't even the way you dismissed my feelings and my autonomy. It was that you stopped seeing me as a person. I became a problem to be managed instead of your mother who loves you. Tears were running down his face now. I know, God, Mom, I know. I was so focused on doing what I thought was practical and responsible that I forgot to be human. I forgot to be your son. That's when I knew my plan had truly succeeded. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd gotten my son back. The legal case against Sarah was eventually settled out of court, with her agreeing to financial restitution and community service. Derek and Sarah's marriage, which had apparently been built on a foundation of financial pressure and mutual selfishness, didn't survive the stress of my burdens becoming their reality. They divorced 8 months later, and while I can't say I was sorry to see Sarah go, I was glad that Derek seemed to rediscover his backbone in the process. Lisa moved back to California the following year, taking a job with a San Francisco firm so she could be closer to family. She bought a house just 20 minutes away and became a regular fixture at our Sunday dinners. You know, Mom, she said one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner, what you did to Derek was pretty ruthless, was it? I asked innocently. Oh, please. The recordings, the lawyer, the identity theft investigation, the trust fund freeze. You orchestrated the whole thing like a chess master. I smiled. Your father always said I was too smart for my own good. So you're admitting it was all planned? Lisa, when someone treats you like you're disposable, you have 2 choices: accept it and fade away, or remind them that you're not as helpless as they assumed. I chose option 2. And Derek? Do you think he's learned his lesson? I looked through the kitchen window at Derek, who was in the backyard playing with the neighbor's dog, laughing at something the little golden retriever was doing. I think Derek learned that actions have consequences, I said. And more importantly, I think he remembered that his mother isn't a burden. She's the woman who taught him everything he knows about fighting for what matters. Looking back now, almost a year later, I don't regret a single part of my plan. Was it manipulative? Absolutely. Was it ruthless? Without question. But was it necessary? I believe it was. In a society that increasingly views aging parents as inconveniences to be managed rather than people to be loved, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you have to show people that the burden they're trying to discard has more fight left in her than they imagined. My son learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it. And now, every Sunday when we sit around the same kitchen table where I once fed him as a child, I'm reminded that the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's getting your family back. The irony, of course, is that by treating me like a burden, Derek created real burdens for himself. Legal fees, financial consequences, family drama, and the collapse of his marriage. Meanwhile, by fighting back, I eliminated the only real burden in the situation, my own powerlessness. I'm 74 now, still living in my own home, still making my own decisions, and still proving every day that this old lady has plenty of fight left in her. Derek visits every Sunday, Lisa stops by throughout the week, and Rosa has become like a daughter to me. Sometimes, the best way to teach someone to value you is to show them exactly what losing you would cost. And sometimes, the burden they're trying to get rid of turns out to be the very thing that was holding their world together. As for Sarah, I heard through mutual friends that she's working 3 jobs trying to pay off her debts and living in a studio apartment across town. I can't say I feel sorry for her, but I do hope she's learned something about the consequences of taking advantage of people you think are powerless. Because the truth is, none of us are powerless until we decide to be. And this old lady decided a long time ago that she wasn't going down without a fight. After all, I didn't survive immigration, widowhood, and raising 2 children just to be discarded like an old piece of furniture when I became inconvenient. I survived all of that to teach my son one final lesson. Respect your elders, or they might just surprise you with how much trouble they can still cause.